Hey.
Yeah, well, I happen to have some very strong opinions on the number of strings that should be on a fiddle, and the answer is 5. I think if is this
them.
little thing on because this is the 5-string fiddle, and that's the correct number of strings. That's all you need because.
This
Because
is also a 5-string.
violas are cool. They've got the C string, and you're like, and then you can't like, this A string's the top. So if you want to keep going up, you got to keep going up, which is fine. But like, you could just have another string there called the E string, which is on the violins. You got the. It's a lot easier to go higher.
For sure.
Get the low. I like to be low. I like to be high, and I like my instrument to take me there.
Wait, so how many strings does a viola have?
4. Violin's
see, I
4.
didn't
Viola's
realize.
yeah, it's down a 4th. Sorry, down a 5th. Blah.
Down a 5th. I didn't know that at all. So wait a second. So what do you do with them? You disagree with the number of strings. So what do we do with them?
You just have to add more.
So we need
It's
to just
kind of like in Spinal Tap when
so
they're
these
like
are unnecessary.
they're like, why don't you
violas
just
are unnecessary. You've heard it
why
here.
don't you just like
You've heard it here first.
make like 10 louder? And it's like, no, 11 is better because there's one more. You have
I
one more.
understand.
This is what you used to have.
That's happening in
Now
the
we
guitar
have-
world. You've seen like the guitar world with
Just
the
one more.
intonated frets, and like now there's 8 strings on a guitar with.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, I mean that's the same battle is raging.
Not to speak anything of the 200-string guitars, so we won't go.
Oh
there.
my god! Yeah, see, I'm not even familiar that that's possible.
Me neither, but they're probably out there somewhere. Someone probably feels as strong about their 200-string guitar as me about 5-string.
Exactly. That's where I'm going with it. Somebody else is exactly as passionate about the number of strings. I mean, in the banjo world, it's kind of already there's already a lot of compartmentalization.
I play the 4-string banjo.
Do you? Do you?
Yeah, I play a tenor banjo tuned like a viola.
Oh, really? Nice. They just with a pick, plectoral style, or
Plectrum banjo.
plectrum banjo.
Yeah.
What do you rock on that? Like the old timey jazz? That's really common, at least.
I think it sounds really good on Irish tunes.
Oh, sure, for sure. Oh, that's great.
And yeah, I think that's like the most good music that I can play like in a style that sounds like it.
Oh,
belongs.
on that instrument.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I like that we're talking about banjos, but we're kind of here to talk about the fiddle.
I've got a little bit of banjo player in me.
That's excellent. Well, I was like, okay, you had the fiddle on the table,
That's
and I was
right.
looking at it, and I was like, you know what? I realized I've never been so close to a fiddle, and like examined it.
Do you want to hold it?
I'll hold it.
Are your hands clean?
They're kind of clean.
Okay.
I haven't done anything crazy with it, with my hands.
It's
Oh, it's really light.
it's much lighter than your banjo.
Shockingly light. Yeah, it's a little depressing. But wait a second. So I always have this in mind when I see fiddle players, because banjo is pulls on your shoulder. It's awkward, but you all are doing stuff with your neck and your chin, and your arms are kind of like a banjo player. Kind of like off to the side. How do you feel? How do you work through that? It's got to take some type of toll.
Oh, well, whoever, this form of this shape of this instrument has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, at least 500 years. And I think whoever kind of finalized that it was something that you would hold under your chin was both a sadist and a masochist. He wanted everyone to suffer. So as someone who has students and teaches workshops and stuff, like, I see people suffering trying to hold this instrument up. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, I'm especially jealous of like pianos, because like you push a button,
Me
you
too.
point at the note that you want. I actually learned that.
True, man.
You guys know the great fiddle player Daryl Anger. He
Yes.
talks about the point and play technique, where you take your finger and you point at the note that you want, and then you play it, and that's all you have to do to play music. But
Interesting.
easier said than done
Sure.
on a keyboard than a violin.
Of course.
It's like how good could string players, be it music, if they could spend the time they spent trying to play notes in tune and with good tone on just actual like musicianship stuff, like listening and like reacting and improvising or whatever.
That's an interesting point. I mean, you see it as a fretted instrument player. That's an obvious problem that I see with the fiddle. I'm like, that's a problem. That's beautiful and amazing, and it allows for so much.
You can
but
see
for
right
me,
here,
it's a problem.
it's a big black hole. There's no help. Yeah. Where do you put your fingers on
frets,
this thing?
No markers, nothing.
How are you supposed to know?
I don't.
There's a big black hole of nothingness.
Okay, well, that's a good question. How are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to know? Because I definitely don't know the answer.
Muscle memory plus ears, because, I mean, if I went completely deaf in this moment and I couldn't hear anything, I could probably play pretty close to in tune. But I wouldn't hear enough to make the micro adjustments that you're...
Gotcha.
Like, it's so funny. You put your finger down. Like, that's how much variation there is with just going back and forth for a slow vibrato.
Sure.
But if you just put your finger down, it's like... Is this F sharp in tune? I don't know. Play the banjo, and I'll play the F sharp on top of it, and then I'll adjust.
Right.
So it's about like, okay, what is Chuck's guitar tuned like, and what does his chord sound like, or how am I going to adjust to all the people around me? Because it's not just like you in a bubble playing music by yourself.
Right, and that's where the ear comes in,
yeah.
Especially, of course, right? Well, and it's funny, as I'm watching your finger move back and forth, I realize that's all in most of the frets of a banjo. You could move your finger back and forth just as much as you were, and it wouldn't change much of anything to what you're doing on the banjo.
But that's sort of the fun,
Right, exactly. The flexibility is, you can't do that type of thing without a bend.
Someone last night at this gig I played with, they were like, wow, your pedal board for your fiddle is amazing. It's like, yeah, I have a space. What should I put there? He's like, get a freeze pedal. I'm like, dude, I have a freeze pedal. It's called a bow. This is my best. This is the first pedal.
Right.
The first guitar pedal I ever got for violin.
So I guess the idea is that you sacrifice something without the frets, but you gain a lot as well. You learn to wield it. Right.
The bow is a pain to figure out how to use and like make it work for you. But part of my strategy has just been to like try to make like just explore sounds without considering them good or bad. Because sometimes sometimes like you need to know how to make the wrong sound on purpose.
That's right.
And then you don't do it by accident, but you might need to like call it up at some point. Like, oh, this calls for a weird sound.
Totally. No, that's a very good point. And that I can hear already in what you're describing, like the approach that you have for instruction, which involves loop pedals, right?
I love loop pedals.
And it's experimental and applicable.
Keeps people honest. Looping pedals is the best tool in the universe for practice, for solo performance, for teaching a classroom and having a third or fourth set of hands, or a student, for composing, for working on your tech, for making practicing fun.
I can see that. No, it does make it fun. And I was looking at your website and realizing that it must be absolutely fun as hell for especially any of your younger students that get to that point where they're actually experimenting with the loop pedal. Like for the first time when I got that, even as a pretty seasoned musician, I was like, holy shit, this looping thing, I could do this for like 12 hours.
Oh yeah.
And it is shockingly fun. And it's
no doubt.
It's a bit of a setup, and you even had like an equipment thing on your equipment requirements on your website.
That's right.
And I was like, yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense too.
I mean, the moral of the story is buy more pedals.
Excellent.
So nothing against people like walking around listening to headphones. It's cool. Sometimes I'll do that with audiobooks. I'm really into audiobooks right now, especially into Stephen King and Tolkien at the moment.
I love Stephen King stuff.
Yeah. But there's like a thing that people do where they just only listen to like music in their head and they're not aware of the music that's literally happening around them at this very moment, even if that's just like one bird and some traffic and like a tiny bit of wind rustling through a tree. Like I consider that music. Our conversation right now. You know, it's music. Like sound is music, so I don't really differentiate between soundscapes and like what is music. It's just more like, well, there's marketable music.
Right,
there's music you're gonna like. Anyway, so there's people. This is very tangential now, but sometimes people walk around and they're not aware of what's happening. So this is a song that's a little bit aggressively preachy towards why you should consider just like experiencing the sounds around you. Listen to the wind flow all around you every day. In the distance up above, birds so far away, birds so far away. If you got an ear, see what you hear, tune into the sound. If you're aware and if you care, there's music all around, music all around. Sound waves flying by, never quite the same. If you don't hear them dancing by, you've got yourself to blame. You've got yourself to blame. Pull your earbuds out and close your eyes. Just give it a chance. When you hear the bear coming round the bend, you'll keep more than your pants. You'll keep more than your pants. Trees rustling, crickets chirp, police crunch under your shoes. Together it's a symphony. Nature's got the blues. Nature's got the blues.
Yeah.
All the people in the world sing and dance to their own song. If we listen close enough, maybe we'd get along. Maybe we'd get along. Listen to the wind flow all around you every day. In the distance up above, birds so far away, birds so far away.
Hell yes, dude. Hell yes.
Anyway, you know, so there's just like a lot of sounds this can make before you buy a single pedal.
I mean, I saw so much of what you were saying in what you just did there. And, you know, I could see one of the first things when you started kind of scraping sideways across the strings of the bow. And it creates, you know, that really interesting percussive sound. I could see, an instructor saying, hey, you know, to a young student, don't do that. That's not how you're supposed to do that. But then you would lose the opportunity to do that type of thing if you didn't kind of allow that to be a part of your arsenal.
Are you talking about the windshield wipers?
Oh, that's nice. The windshield wipers. Hell yes, man. The windshield wipers is what I'm talking about.
My dad is his name's Dave Reiner, and he plays the fiddle, and that's probably the biggest reason why I play the fiddle. But yeah, he showed me this sound. My dad showed me that sound when I was a kid. It's just the windshield wipers.
It's great.
It's crazy because like you just go back and forth, but somehow you get this. Weird like laser beam.
Exact laser
Like
beams. Absolutely.
short. These weird short sounds come out of it. So
well, and all that stuff has. I'm gonna get real nerdy here, but all that stuff has a lot of metaphorical value. I mean, your song, obviously, you're illustrating on the fiddle what you're singing about to a large degree, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really smart, man. That's a very, very cool way to just express all that. And I guess it kind of, in a lot of ways, encapsulates your experience with the fiddle, which is obviously from if your dad taught you so young age, I assume.
Oh yeah, started at age 5.
At age 5
with my dad and a Suzuki teacher. So.
And so Suzuki, we talked about this a little bit, but
yeah.
So Suzuki is a particular method, right?
Yeah, it's classical music for people who are learning these string instruments, and it took me the first decade of me playing. I just didn't think either of them were that cool until I went to fiddle camp. So
oh really?
That's why I say fiddle camp saved my life, and then.
So you were a teenager, you hit fiddle camp, and that was when, after 10 years of doing this,
yeah,
so what about those first 10 years though? Like, what were you doing? Just taking lessons every week?
Like the Reiner family band would show up at my like elementary school, and I'd get up and play, and I'd be so embarrassed, and that seems so silly now because
fascinating.
It obviously was so cool that we had a family band.
It's pretty amazing,
and it's just that the grass is always greener, so I thought it was weird, but
right.
But it turns out the weird stuff is actually the best stuff. So,
yeah, that's an interesting flip. So wait, what happened? When you went to fiddle camp?
Like I went to Nashville and met John Hartford and Vassar Clements and Natalie McMaster and Daryl Anger and Tracy Silverman and Mark Wood and Rachel Barton Pine.
Some people you still play with.
Well,
have played with recently.
Yeah. I mean, my heroes. Yeah, I have gotten to play with Daryl the most out of all those.
Yeah. So back then, you got exposed to all that at about 15 years old.
I think I was. My decade claim was slightly exaggerated.
Oh, I see. All right. Hey, no worries.
I see you doing the math. Which is,
yeah, I'm doing the math.
Very astute. But yeah, I was 12 and 13 when I first went to fiddle camp.
All right, got you. So you meet all of these people at fiddle camp, which is kind of a common deal.
Yeah, and saw other people. I guess they were kids my age at that time.
People,
short people. I like to call them short people.
Yeah, human puppies.
Anyway, yeah, the other kids were amazing. Like Billy Contreras was there as a kid, and he was like, we're the same exact age, and he was, as a 13-year-old performing in the staff concerts.
I see.
As like a child and playing stuff that no adults could play. So
right.
It was like much different from what I perceived as like, oh, it's my parents and they're like
right
old lame friends. I mean, I remember going to a picking party as a very small child, and like everyone is jamming out in the yard. I remember sitting in the kitchen making a sign about how smoking cigarettes was bad for you and to show all the adult musician jammers because if I didn't tell them, they weren't gonna know that they were gonna die.
Oh yeah, well I mean that's important, but also they were jamming.
Not my job.
Yeah, not your job.
Not my job.
Maybe timing might have been a little off.
Yeah,
because you could have been picking, but that wasn't cool to you.
No, right. So I just getting kids to care is a hard.
Oh, tell me about
a hard thing. So I am lucky that I stuck with it long enough. I thought my parents would never let me quit. Now, talking with them about it, since then I have found out if I really wanted to quit, they would have let me. But
Right.
I saw
Right.
there were some good things possible. Like my first gig was at a used bookstore. So,
That seems like a pleasant place to play.
yeah, the Reiner family band played Upper Story Books in Lexington, Massachusetts a
Nice.
lot of times, and you would get like $35 in used book credit. And like back in the 90s,
Not bad.
at a
Yeah, man.
a used bookstore, $35 is gonna go a long way.
I
So
remember.
it's like, wow, playing music
Yeah.
can get me cool stuff. Like I want,
You put that together.
yeah, I can get used books, and like maybe that could become money someday. And
Oh,
it's
interesting.
like, all right, well, that seems worth it. I should like keep going to lessons. And
Well, so wait, do you go back to the camp still?
that camp.
Yeah, that camp.
Well, the evolution of, I mean, the first camp I ever went to was that was the O'Connor camps, and he would have like all the heroes. Then he got into his method. I started teaching at the method camps, which is where I met my now wife, Joy Adams,
awesome.
who plays the cello. We met teaching at O'Connor method camps all across the country: Charleston, South Carolina, Maine, Boston. And so that
Amazing.
so that fiddle camp, I'm telling you, fiddle camp saved my life. in,
Yeah,
like,
that sounds
a
amazing.
lot of different ways.
Yeah, it sounds like. I mean, looking back, the thread is
I
there.
have a life partner. My mom, who's a metalsmith, and you can go to her website. You
Yeah,
can
I
see
can-
the rings she made us on the close-up cam. Oh yeah, I don't know if it's, yeah.
Very
Can't
cool.
see, you can't quite see how amazing it is, but I'm very lucky. And you go to CynthiaIdeMetalsmith.com.
It is.
Check out my mom's work. But
That's
yeah.
very neat, man. That's a very cool story. I mean, it's funny to when I hear it, I can't help but compare it to how I got into music.
Yeah.
And it was family stuff, but it was just church. Like we always were,
Yeah.
it's a weekly gig.
Church,
Basically,
church
is what it
music
is.
is a big part of, I mean, Bach.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, like-
of course.
like-
Well, I mean,
the-
I think a lot of musicians that you meet in the South,
Yeah.
that's how they came up, and Midwest, of course, too.
Cool.
And I wasn't even aware that there was a professional side to
Oh,
what I
sure.
was doing because
Yeah.
it was always in a different context. And so when I hear you talk about moving from family band into a more educational role, you're teaching, you're at the
Yeah.
camp and stuff, I can see how the context changes your view of the fiddle, and that means a lot to people trying to come up into it too.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to learn it.
Well, and having been a grumpy kid with like a bad attitude helps me connect with grumpy kids with bad attitudes now. Students who are like their parents are flustered because no teacher can like keep them happy.
yeah, can't
Like,
reach 'em.
I'm like the last resort guy. They're like, this student might be they might quit if you can't get them like interested again. So I'm sort of in the business of like saving kids who are about to like fall off the edge.
That's great, man.
and like
I love
quit
that.
the instrument.
That's an amazing place to be, like to be in the hierarchy of like fiddle education. And I see that. I do a lot of just, I guess it's kind of like pro bono lessons. I don't have like a very structured thing, but I just talk to a lot of people about banjo on a pretty regular basis, and
Sure.
that has also shown me exactly what you're saying. How much of a psychological, game in a lot of
Yeah.
ways these types of things are, because we compare ourselves to one another, we compare ourselves to ourselves. we oh, that was great, but I can't do it again. That type of shit
Oh.
people get into.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, and it's something I've noticed in education, in music education, where there's not almost enough diagnosis of people's mindsets, and I've been saying this for a little while to a handful of people, not being too preachy about it.
But you're saying it to these
I'm
guys,
saying it
too.
to these people, but
And
I'm
me.
saying, hey, I have
me.
that's true, but you facilitated it because
Okay.
I'm looking at your podcast, which I
Yeah.
think we can pivot into, River of Suck.
That's right.
Right? And I think that's kind of exactly what we're talking about now. It's
Yeah.
this type of psychological stress.
So here's the analogy, right? I mean, first off, those barriers to success, you were just saying, like, I'm not good enough. All those
Right,
weird
right.
thoughts that jump into your head, and try and sabotage your good vibes when you're trying to be on your path or whatever.
That's right.
I call those thought piranhas.
Thought piranhas.
And
that's got a ring to it.
yeah, and shout out to Sarah Gorak out there if you're out there. Sarah Gorak helps invent the term thought piranhas in this context. But basically, you're on one side of the river of suck. Behind you is your comfort cave.
Oh.
You're on your comfort shore.
Interesting.
All the stuff you already know how to do.
Right.
And then on the other side of the river of suck, there's little tiny future versions of yourself who can do the things that you wish you could do now.
Yeah.
But they're far off and you have to cross the river of suck. And the problem is there's a bunch of raging whitewater rapids and like rocks and thought piranhas. And those are all the obstacles in your path. So basically, like, everyone wants to just be awesome right now today.
Right.
Everyone wants to, like, you know, and reality TV has a big part in messing up people's expectations of, like, how far can you get so fast. But, like, you have to suck at something before you can be good at it. And
it's true.
This instrument's a great example of, like, people are like, I mean, it's hard to make sound. Like it's a
unbelievably hard.
It's a what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to learn to play the fiddle is like soul crushingly hard for so many people, and anyone who's good at it has gone through the soul crushing.
Right.
And that's like the step by step, small steps of practicing and playing a lot over time.
You know, wow, that's a very healthy way of looking at it in my opinion. Because you know, you look at other musicians. And inevitably, there's this human instinct to compare yourself to them in some way. And I think, like you're pointing out, you know, if you just acknowledge that everybody's going through this type of issue, everybody has to try to figure out a way across that river.
Well, that's the thing is you're not suffering alone.
Exactly.
That's the point. That's why we call it the River of Suck swim team.
The swim team.
Because everyone has these kind of self-doubt feelings like, I'm not going to make it. Will they like me? Will they like my song? Will they like my tone? Will they think of my ideas? Will they think of my solo? If you judge your human self-worth as the quality of the last improvised solo that you took in a jam, that is a dark path.
It is.
Because you're never going to take your best solo at the jam every time.
Right.
And you have to, like...
Right.
Be able to show up
true.
again.
You know, and that's a hard thing to communicate to somebody who wants to learn a new instrument. And I think, you know, we have a lot of fans out there that are interested in watching us play music. Some of them are musicians, some of them aren't. And I always try to think about their perspective because some people who don't play music at all are just enjoying the music and enjoying the sounds, you know.
Oh yeah.
And they may not have that kind of psychological complex when they're hearing that stuff, but it's interesting because I realize I can't go back. I can't go back to that world where it was like you don't know anything about instruments. You know, sometimes I listen to music even and I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful song, but I'm just like analyzing it.
Well, right. So I mean, you can either just you can have these weird emotions and thoughts and they can like send you into the downward spiral. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I just have found that talking to people about it, like I was giving workshops at Fiddle Hell and some other places about the River of Suck. Yeah.
Fiddle Hell's the camp, right?
Fiddle Hell is a festival that my family runs. You can check it out. fiddlehell.com.
Excellent.
But I was talking about it and you know, a couple of years went by and it's just like me talking. And I'm like, well, I need some new ideas. And that's when the podcasts started to start exploding at that point. I was like, oh, if I had a podcast, I could talk to other people about their feelings and then sharing all the pain and suffering and success that they've had.
That's great, yeah.
And I don't have to have all the ideas. I just have to ask the right questions.
Well, so how have your after you ask all the questions, right or wrong, how do your guests then come back to you afterward? Like, are they saying, "Wow, that was really cathartic," or you know, something like that, or do they say, "Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun," or like, what type of what do they feel?
that is a hilarious meta podcast question, good sir.
We have podcasts in podcasts.
I would like to brag that on a recent podcast with Bonnie and Taylor Sims, who also happen to live here in Longmont, Colorado, where we're at right now at the old High Lonesome headquarters. They said that I had the most fun questions they'd ever been asked.
Oh, well, there you go.
Because I guess like a lot of interviews are just biography. Like you were small and a child, and now you're big and famous. What did you do in between?
How did you get there?
But I want to hear about like the specifics of the suffering and why people didn't quit when everything seemed impossible. That is like the golden stuff right there.
And what do you think answering that question? How do you think that might help? This is like an academic thing,
I think that it helps you understand that like all the people who you think are so successful and who seem to not be struggling at all, and they're playing every festival and they're doing all the things you wish
it's a great point
that you could do. They also went through a lot of suffering and struggles. So
absolutely.
I think the successful people are the same. The only difference between the really successful people and the people who quit is like they kept going when it was hard. Now, obviously, that's not including the socioeconomic and racial factors that have made our whole society kind of unequal. But the fact remains that there is such a thing as like seeing a future for yourself and making small steps to get there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Well, and I think it's again. I can't help but think of all of the other, all the people who don't play instruments and kind of see the magic on stage. And see the magic. And what a lot of people don't realize, and what you're clearly exposing here, is that there's a lot that goes into that beyond playing to a metronome, which is super important, by the way. Yeah. Everybody out there, play to metronome. It's cool.
Yeah, never leave home without a metronome, friends.
Nice.
It strikes me, I would like to, I have a present for you.
Oh,
this seems like a good time. In the
like me and Buddha are both very grateful.
It's just that
oh yeah. T-shirts, man, I am all about
it. You don't have to suffer by yourself. So I would like to offer you this Magic River of Suck swim team T-shirt.
This is great.
And I've also got one for Lily over there on the camera.
Excellent.
I think this is a Lily-sized one.
Oh, that one's got long sleeves too. Yeah. Very nice.
Can I throw it? Should I throw it?
Nice.
All right.
Nice move.
She's got it. All right. Perfect.
This is great.
Oh wow. Oh, that's a long sleeve one.
Yeah. Look at that.
How is that in the same box? I'm really confused. I got them from the same box. How does that happen?
So some of. Oh yeah.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Do you want a long sleeve?
What a quirk.
I meant to give you. Cool. Perfect. You get a long sleeve. That's
nice.
Right. Now available at riverofsuck.com. We have River of Suck t-shirts. And I just got long sleeves and sweatshirts for the first time. So.
Very cool. So did you... Now, I saw some of your guests.
Yeah.
I tried to listen to as much as I could, but there was a lot of different interesting stuff on there. And Bonnie and Taylor are local, so I was like, oh, that one is really important. I listened to a lot of that one. And the level of, intimacy that you're kind of helping, you're helping everybody express is really impressive. And it seems, I think with them, it was really clear. I was really shocked to see Temple Grandin on your list of interviewees. For those of you who don't know, that's a Colorado
sometimes
legend.
You got to shoot for the stars.
Yeah.
Once in a while, they email you back.
Yeah, once in a while.
Or their secretary will email you back.
Right, on their behalf. But yeah, I mean, those are pretty disparate guests. And then a favorite of mine is Rashad Eggleton, your first guest. So when you take those three guests,
sure,
Bonnie and Taylor, Temple Grandin, and Rashad Eggleton.
Yeah,
it's a very interesting mix of people who you're identifying like a common theme here.
Yeah, I mean, my first idea was just to go beyond just musicians and talk to scientists.
Sure,
because musicians are like. Oh, I suck. I played a wrong note. And scientists are like, that experiment didn't work. We didn't set it up right. How can we make a better experiment? I'm not trying to minimize the suffering of scientists, but like
Sure.
the idea of being a person of science who uses data and results and experiments to like find deeper conclusions, like by the very nature of it, you fail. You fail. Everyone is guaranteed to have
Right.
failed experiments.
I'm with you there.
And it's like expected and normal.
Yeah.
And with music and creative endeavors, people just want to be amazing. And there's just more reasons to do something than to make money or to be the best. So there's a lot of like good human experiences that we should be having, that we just do it because we enjoy it.
That's a very good point. You know,
If you want to be happy,
absolutely,
you have to do things that you like.
Well, and there's always that balance. I think there's always that balance in life. Like there is a certain amount of struggle to get things that are worthwhile. You know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of all wrapped up in the word worthwhile. I mean, if it's worthwhile, we're talking about
Being worth
yeah,
the while.
Worth was a very concise word. I don't know if I realized how much I appreciated it until right now.
I'm going to start my next two wordles with worth and while.
Interesting. You're going to let us know how that pans out. I still don't fully understand Wordle, but I'm starting to get there.
It's okay. We'll start you tomorrow.
Okay.
You're starting tonight.
Starting tonight.
You're joining the cult.
But what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Words. This is actually an interesting perspective, I think, that you're putting out there. Gnome culture.
Gnome culture. That's right.
I mean, you have a 3-part EP, I guess, or is it?
I'm calling it a micro EP.
A micro EP.
Gnomes are typically short.
They are typically short and delicious.
it's
We'll
3
talk about that
songs.
later.
Oh
You
my
don't
gosh.
agree. You don't agree. I get it, but anyway,
I think they're our friends.
they are our friends. You know, absolutely. We'll get into that later.
Okay.
Anyway, I think I do think it's interesting that you have that you have 3, parts to this EP, and
Yeah.
each one is a different gnome. Mm-hmm. There's an ancient
Doing
gnome
a different thing.
doing a different thing, right?
There's the ancient gnome on the God, where which gnomes go where? Let's see. Roaming gnome on the windy ridge top, ancient gnome in the mossy woods, and there's another one. I forget the other one. You'll have to look it up by going to search my name, Andy Reiner.
Let us know what Andy's
on any
songs
of
are.
the streaming platforms. Spotify, Tidal. I hear good things about Tidal.
Yeah, I have to.
I'm looking to check it out.
For sure.
I'm in all the places. And yeah, it was, the middle of 2020 was a weird time for a lot of us.
Why?
Everyone.
No, I'm sure.
And my wife, Joy Adams, who plays cello with Big Richard, she got into like TikTok and found cottagecore, and we had just moved into this like weird abandoned ghost town. So she was making like banjo videos in the like old ruins of cabins, and the cottagecore people were all about it. And I found out that there was this subset of that called gnomecore, which is like we're really into like gnomes. It's an aesthetic. We just really love anything that feels like gnomes. I was like, wow, this is cool.
Interesting.
So I got some like garden gnomes essentially from craftsmen on Etsy and from
Nice.
Give 'em some
plug.
various websites, and collected them and put them in my yard. And I asked them for music, and when I asked them for music, they just gave it to me. It was like, oh, this is gnome music. So I've sort of just tried to stumble upon it by gazing into their.
So these are original pieces
Yeah.
that you've written, but they are based on an already established genre.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's. Well, I checked out what music was considered gnomecore, and I was like, does this really sound like gnomes dancing around a fairy forest? I don't know.
It's a good.
I think it needs more mandolins.
I think that's an important question. I think, for all of you out there who may or may not be familiar with this, but with instrumental music, one of the most important parts is the title, because this is the only words associated with it.
That's right.
Right. So when you describe a gnome and what they're doing, you have a bit of an obligation as a responsible artist to actually make it sound as though that is, that's what you're. It's like Peter and the Wolf, right? The metaphors line up with everything.
Speaking of lining up, I mean, I think for me to consider it no music, I've gotten very specific. It needs to be like a fiddle tune or a vibe that has something weird about the form. It's not just going to be a normal 4-bar phrase all the time, or like
I
something
see.
weird about like here's
Gotcha.
this the jig one. That's the first track. That's a melody, and it's 3 bars long. The phrases are 3 bars long. It has 3 parts. So
there's a little awkwardness to it.
yeah,
Listening experience.
It's like a little funny. They break some of the rules.
Sure.
And then
Breaking rules.
Breaking
Starting to
rules.
see a theme here.
And then there needs to be 2 other melodic parts. And if you play all 3 parts at the same time, you'll get the full effect of the chord.
Oh, I see. Oh, I gotcha.
But when you do it with like plinky mandolins, it just feels to me like the gnomes are just
sure
giving me music. It's a gift, really.
So what's the genre? What is it called?
Gnomecore.
Gnomecore. That's the genre of music.
Yeah.
Okay.
My micro EP is music for gnomes. Gnomecore. But there's a whole aesthetic called gnomecore. Right. I think as an aesthetic, it's more well known and popular among people who like to prance with like flowers and
I get
weird
it.
trees.
I mean, there's a certain appeal to that.
Places.
I mean, yeah, hiding
all
places.
about the little hiding places.
That's part of it. I get it. Yeah, that's a really good point too. I guess there's something core for a lot of things.
I mean, have you tried living in a stump?
I haven't, but I have. Ever since I was a little kid, I definitely have looked at a stump and thought, you know what? I get that too. I think I could do it. I think I could live there.
Some of those redwoods, though.
Yeah, the bigger ones now. When I was a kid, I'd look at the oak trees in Indiana. But no, I totally did. I looked at that stuff. My grandma was real she thought she was a witch, and so she was always like telling us weird stories, and those eventually sunk in. And I'd see it, every once in a while, and some of those stories like creep into your childhood, and you start to realize like gnomes are real. Gnomes are real. And I'm sure there are people in a gnome core where it's like not even a question, but out there, there's doubt perhaps.
Well, I'm not here to judge what people think.
Me neither.
But I think gnomes are cool, whether or not they're real. So
right, and yes, and delicious.
What are you talking about, man? You're trying to eat them?
Well, I mean, look, certain parts of the country, yeah, it's like a delicacy.
But if they're tiny people, isn't that like cannibalism?
You're
a monster.
Whoa. Tiny people.
This guy's a cannibal.
You're talking about swaths of people in the United States who agree with me. This is not. No, this is like stuff written into Harry Potter books.
I mean, yeah, a lot of people are into weird stuff, but
exactly, yeah,
doesn't make it normal.
No, in fact, I think by definition it means that it's not normal.
Whatever, cannibal.
But that means I'm a gnome too.
I mean,
like, do I have gnome blood in me? What's the overlap?
Gnomes are share a part of us.
Okay. We're gonna circle back to this, but
I think we're related to gnomes. In some way.
I do understand. I understand that point of view. Obviously, yeah, because I can understand why gnomes do some of the things they do. I can relate to them. I see it. But
they got noses. They got faces.
I don't know.
They've got pipes. They've got mushrooms.
I love lambs too, but they're delicious.
Actually, I have one of my gnome mini statues is a little bear that's like got gnomes climbing all over it, and he's like eating the gnomes.
See, the bear gets it.
Yeah, bear gets it. I don't
want to hear
But you're
anymore.
not a bear.
I don't.
Maybe you look at that beard.
I don't want to hear. Yeah, it's possible.
Right.
I don't know. But wait a second. Now, here's one more question though about the overlap between music and things that are seemingly non-musical.
Okay.
Dinosaurs and music.
Yeah.
What's the overlap?
Do you know about my song?
Well, the River of Suck has 3 tiers of membership. Like, you have Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so you've got dinosaurs that represent...
Basosaurus rex, Cheloceratops, Violiraptor, Violiniodactyl, Basosaurus rex, Cheloceratops, Violiraptor, Chelosaurus stomp. It's from the song Chelosaurus Stomp.
So you wrote the song and then created the membership stuff.
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
So where did the song come from? Like, how'd the overlap? Where did the overlap of stringed instruments and dinosaurs? How'd that come about?
well, it's another story involving Joy, because I called Joy up and I was like, I want to write a cello tune that's like really easy for cellists. Everyone writes all these fiddle tunes,
Right.
even if you play it on the banjo or the mandolin. They're fiddle tunes.
Right.
I was like, where's the cello tunes at? There's got to be something
point.
good for the cello. I was like,
Absolutely.
Joy, what do I have to do to make like a good...
And you're asking her because she's a cellist, just for those.
I'm just
who don't
calling her
know.
on the phone.
Your wife is a
She's-
cello player, so you're asking her.
We
Yeah.
were not dating or anything. I was.
Oh,
we were
I
just
see.
Like,
You just a
this
cellist.
was
You knew at that point.
Way back. It's
Gotcha.
like Joy would know. Joy would know what to do.
Cool.
So I asked her like the parameters for my tune. I went off into Rocky Mountain National Park and went on a hike with a little notebook.
Awesome.
And at a certain point, I got really hot, so I was walking around without a shirt, and then it started hailing. And I was like, this is weird. I'm going to sit under this tree. And so I started writing it under a tree without... The only reason I even remember the shirt part is because some other people walked past on the path and looked at me and were like, what is this guy doing?
And you were writing a song about dinosaurs.
Yeah, I was just sitting under a tree writing a song about dinosaurs.
Right on, man.
And,
But it wasn't for any particular reason. It just kind of came to you.
You can wait for music to come to you, or you can go out and seek it. I was like, I'm gonna write a piece of music today by walking around by myself, and that's why this comes back to the earbuds thing. This is why I try to listen for the sounds that are around me.
I see. Right. Because any of it can spark inspiration.
Yeah, in the space is where some music will fill.
Right.
If you're listening to something else, just to be clear, I love listening to music. Music is awesome.
You mean like normal music?
Yeah, but you have to have moments when you're not listening to someone else's music, that you're allowing some space,
Right.
some sonic space,
Definitely.
so that things can come to you.
No, absolutely. And I think for me, hiking, I like to run. Anytime I'm doing something like that, I try not to have music a lot of the time because if I like listening to everything. It's
That's right.
totally true. And it kind of clears me. It kind of wipes the slate clean. And then sometimes that actually helps me write, coming back to it fresh.